The history of ContactPoint is that I wanted to start a company that really got into the nitty-gritty of what was happening on a phone call. I find myself totally incapable of standing up in front of an audience and saying, let me tell you about the sales best practices, if I don't have their phone calls. Because I find that it's just information that really doesn't stick. Everybody sits there and goes, yeah, that's good, that's true, but then it doesn't get applied to anything. Because we're humans. We just don't work that way. We apply what actually we can relate to or connect to. And so I play live phone calls in our training classes because I can say, here's what I'm hearing, and here's the impact or the outcome of what I'm hearing. And if you continue in this behavior, you're going to lose the company money, or you're going to lose this sale, or you're going to offend a customer. Who knows what it is, right? So by getting the live call and showing the problem on the live call, I can then say, here's the solution. It's just sales, right? If you want somebody to buy something, there has to be a pain. I'm not going to replace my windshield unless it's cracked or unless it's going to be forced upon me by the government to do so. So pain drives the sale. And likewise, pain drives training. Now, most people look at training as, let's get out the colored markers and let's eat some food and let's laugh and let's talk through and what some good ideas are and feel good about ourselves. And it's not that we don't laugh in the trainings that I do, and it's not that there aren't colored markers in the trainings that I do, but my goal isn't for everybody to have a good time. My goal is for everybody to make more money. And of course we do that by having a good time, but that's with a very strong foundation that says feedback is important, and hearing the harsh realities of what's happening is important, because learning takes place when we see and feel and hear the harsh realities. When pain happens, learning happens, because we don't want that. So my son, who has a very hard time at age 12, just doesn't like fruits and vegetables still. The child older than him and the child younger than him love it. So something in his head said, I don't like fruits and vegetables for some reason. So we've been working on this for years. It wasn't until recently when we realized, let's share with Jonah that people on ships that would travel for months and months and months across the ocean would get very sick, and they couldn't figure out why. And then they realized that the reason why people were getting sick and eventually getting gout and other diseases that were painful and caused them to lose limbs is because they weren't eating fruits and vegetables. Look at some pictures of people with these kinds of diseases in the world today. And then when he looks at those pictures, he goes, why don't you go get me some fruit? I'd like to eat some fruit now. So it's a very real example of when we see pain, we see something we don't like, in a stark way, we make a change. That's why we change. So that's why I play phone calls and training. Now let me address feedback. Feedback, when you create an environment where you're comfortable hearing feedback, you grow. I love feedback, because if somebody's willing to give me feedback, I'm going to improve. Now, there is a large group of people that when they hear feedback, shrink. They get defensive. They feel like they've got to protect themselves because they don't want anybody to know they've got a weakness. It is hard to hear feedback, especially if you're that personality. And even if you're not, it's hard to hear feedback. It's like, all right, brace myself. What am I going to hear now? But again, when you hear feedback, you've got to open your palms up. You've got to be open. Don't fold your arms. You sit back and you go, all right, hit me with it. I want to hear it. Your eyes are open. You're listening. Your ears are out, right? I want to hear it. You got to listen openly with feedback. If when you're hearing feedback, you're thinking, that's not fair, or they didn't know what kind of day I was having, or I was really busy. If you're thinking about all the ways to be defensive, or even worse, to attack them, well, it wouldn't have done that if the company had done this, or I wouldn't have done this if they hadn't blah, 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 and the product was different. And you come up with all these reasons. Well, that's not listening. That's not learning, and you're certainly not creating an atmosphere of feedback. Now, likewise, if the company, whenever they get feedback, attack you or say, no, that's not the way it is, you're going to be less inclined to give the company feedback. So it goes both ways. But in the end, it's important that you have a culture of acceptance and a willingness to say, feedback's important, I'm going to be open to it, I'm going to listen to it, and if I have some questions, I'm going to say, clarify that for me in a non-confrontational way, but in the end, I'm going to go, thank you. Thank you for that, I appreciate it. And that keeps you continue to be open and continue to have people want to give you that feedback. That's the foundation of what allows us to go into a company and provide them with live calls, which, boy, I don't like hearing my own live calls. But eventually you get to the point where you go, thank you for letting me hear my live call, because now I can change that skill, and that skill and get better. If your goal is not to get better, then continue not liking feedback. If your goal is to get better, then open yourself up to feedback.